So, and I always like to start when we talk, like, I think everybody's familiar with Colgate, but I think that, the size and scale of the company is something that I think people need to be reminded of. So maybe start with just a little bit about Colgate, and the operation, and then we can move on to some of the things that you've got going on.
Great. Okay. Yes. So briefly, Colgate is approaching $20 billion in net revenue, 34,000 people, and we sell our products in 200 countries around the world. We are in 4 core categories. You probably know oral care, of course, but we're also in personal care and home care with more local brands regionally. So we have, like you would know, in the US, Soft Soap or Irish Spring. We own those brands, as well as Tom's of Maine. And we also own Hill's Pet Nutrition, which is a premium pet food brand, Science Diet. So it gives you a little bit of scope. We're global. The other fun fact is that the Colgate brand is in more homes than any other. So it's the highest household penetrated brand name in the world. So we like to think of ourselves as, compared to some of our peers, small and mighty.
Mm-hmm. So your sustainability initiatives are vast. But the phrase that I latched onto immediately was swords and shields.
Yeah.
So maybe we start with swords and shields. Try that 3 times fast.
Yeah. I know, right?
And distinguish between the two.
Okay, so let me just frame it with our strategy briefly, kind of overview. So first, and we really do, all 34,000 employees really do understand and live by our purpose statement, which is reimagining a healthier future for all people, our pets, and our planet. And that's our North Star for our strategy. And our strategy is anchored in 3 ambition spaces: driving social impact, helping millions of homes, and preserving our environment. And underneath, so we developed this. It's our 2025 Sustainability and Social Impact Strategy. We developed it back in 2018, 2019, rolled it out. And we quickly found that it was, there's 11 actions that are appropriate for our business that sit under that, and I won't go through all of those. And then close to 50 targets that sit behind it. And what we quickly found was to make an impact, to really make a difference in specific areas which are very critical and important for our business, that we had to focus. So one message I'd like to leave you with is focus is key. So we applied this metaphor, swords and shields. Shields are things, across all those 50 targets, et cetera, that we have to get done. We have to get done because of compliance or taxes and fees or reputational risk. It's just too risky. We have to do that. And we have lots of subject matter experts across the company, over 100 people who contributed to building this strategy who get that work done. But swords are where we want to lead, and where we are going to put, when in the world of business there's trade-offs. There's always trade-offs. You have to make choices. So we try to ring fence those swords and try to compromise less, put more resources, money, time behind those. So across those ambition spaces, we have 3 swords. One in our social pillar, which is around bringing oral health and hygiene to children and education about why it's important to brush your teeth, to children in underserved communities all over the world, including in the US. There's a lot of gaps of communities where children aren't brushing their teeth, and cavities is the #1 disease in children around the world. So that's something we think we should own. We sell half the world's toothpaste. And then we have another one around plastic. We talked about that last year with the tube. That's very important to us because all our packaging is plastic today. So we part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation global commitment. So we're trying to reduce our virgin plastic. We're trying to make everything recyclable. And then the third sword is around accelerating action on climate change, which is why we're all here this week, I think. So we're trying to do our part, as all private sector companies are trying to do. And that requires a lot of partnership, there's some nice discussion today around how we're going to fund all this. So that's something we might tease out a little bit more, but there's a lot of work going on there at Colgate. So
I think we've got the swords. What are some of the shields that you would say, like, this is just something we have to do for whatever reason, but it's got to be part of the business from the get-go?
So one of the big, and this is somewhat related to what I want to talk about a little more under climate, is You may not readily think this, but we purchase a lot of agricultural commodities like palm oil and soy. And there's big issues, particularly in Southeast Asia with, not legally farmed fields for palm and a lot of deforestation and conversion of land that shouldn't be because it wasn't approved. So this is something we're leaning into, and we've learned you cannot do this by yourself, so we're part of the Consumer Goods Forum. So this is an important piece of work for us, but it's not one that you want to run to consumers and say, hey, look what we're doing. It's hard work, and it's going to take time, but we have to do it. It's important. It's important for the human rights aspect, for the biodiversity aspect, huge reputational risk. There's a lot of media and NGO activity around it.
Yeah, only downside, there's no upside to supply chain management with consumers.
Well, right. I mean, I think it's too complicated of a message, but a lot of that work also, forests and trees are a great carbon sink. So, there is an advantage climate-wise, but I think that's not where we want to tell the story. I don't think so.
So in terms of the sword part of climate action, like what are some of the partnerships, some of the initiatives? What are some of the things you're really proud of?
Well, I think, what I wanted to kind of dive into a little bit or double click into is the partnership we have. So partnerships, if one of the messages I leave you with is focus is key, partnerships is the other big piece, both externally but internally. And one of the best partnerships that we've formed over the past several years is with our procurement team. Because we can't get there on our Scope 3 without their help. Obviously, Scope 3 for us is mostly purchased goods and services. So our footprint, Colgate's footprint, and our peers in our categories are similar, is 15% upstream, which is upstream of the value chain. So that's mostly our materials and our packaging. 5% own operations, which is the only part we really control, and then 80% downstream when consumers take our products home and use them. So we're really focused right now, and we have SBTI approved net zero targets, a transition plan, and we're aiming for 2040, and we have interim targets. So to hit those interim targets, we need procurement's help on the Scope 3. So we're focused on that 15 plus 5, 20% right now. So they've just been, terrific partners. We have targets for 2025, 2030, 2040 for our purchased goods and services, and they're making good progress. So they've put a team in place behind all this.
How do you deal, because I imagine you're making their jobs harder in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So how does that go over when this other department, they've got these abstract goals and procurement's like, well, I got to keep my costs down. I got to keep my division,
Oh yeah.
So how does that? How do you navigate that? How do you finesse that relationship?
So first of all, like I said, I can't speak highly enough of our chief procurement officer and her team, and they embrace this. They understand and appreciate the role that they play to reduce our impact. So I think first of all that makes them proud. So that's one of the good carrots, if you will, to help them. But they put a team in place, and that team oversees both procurement sustainability, but also innovation. So you can imagine when we work with suppliers, there's an incredible amount of innovation that needs to happen to help us remain competitive. But innovation and sustainability go hand in hand. So right now we're working, we're fortunate that our top 100 suppliers, and we have tens of thousands of suppliers, but our top 100 make up 80% of our footprint. So that's where you start. Remember again, focus. You got to start somewhere. So we'll focus on engaging those top 100. And working with them now, we're getting to know them better and engaging them on, how do we innovate together to lower the carbon footprint of our surfactants, which happen to be one of our biggest emissions materials. Or in the case of our pet food, a lot of the grains are big footprints. So we're working, for instance, with our Hills team and one of their suppliers on regenerative agriculture for rice, which lowers the overall footprint of the rice significantly, just by farming a bit differently, and there's innovation involved there.
I love the, it goes back to what Brendan said earlier, is that every business is a climate business now. It affects, no matter what you're doing, consumer packaged good or pet food, or it just has to be part of the equation.
Right.
Tell me more about the innovations that you've seen. I know we used one example last year. You could probably use that example again. But it's, what are some of the innovations you've seen that have been driven by this desire to create more sustainable products?
So, yeah, and just to do the plug for the tube real quick, when we set out to design the first recognized recyclable tube, we didn't intentionally say, oh, and it has to be lower carbon, lower water footprint in production. But we were very pleasantly surprised that it is over 25% lower carbon to produce it and 40% less water to produce it. So when you innovate, if you build that in, I think that's smart. When it comes to materials and even our own operations, one of the low-hanging fruits, frankly, is electrification and moving to renewable electricity. We have a target to reach 100% by 2030. We just did our first virtual power purchase agreement last year where, if you're not familiar with that, basically we fund a brand new electrification project, or not electrification, renewable project. So we funded a major solar farm in Texas. So, we kind of think of it as we went to the we are going to the ribbon cutting. We get to sign instead of signing the boat, you sign the panel, the solar panel. So it's kind of ours. We love, and it's great. That's what companies are doing. So Amazon, Microsoft, they have many of these arrangements, but it has to be additive. So that's, and it's a long-term commitment. And what we're finding with our suppliers is there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there because they haven't done that yet. And maybe we can look at ways to pool suppliers or jointly go in on projects. So it's innovating the way you engage with suppliers and what are the mechanisms or the tactics they can use, and introducing that to them, whether it's in our own operations, like I said, or with the suppliers.
I feel like that's really where this conversation has moved, is as opposed to just what you can do with your own resources, your own staff, your own factories, to then look to
the value chain,
to look at the longer, and then use your leverage and work with people, but also have the stick ready in the other hand to find partners that are going to work with you on your goals. So do you have any advice for companies that are like just starting that process and evaluating who they've got and trying to collect the data, frankly, about?
The data, that's the other point I wanted to make. Yeah, start with the data. I mean, the data is the key to all this, right? We are now in the process of signing up with a company called Watershed that is going to be tremendously helpful in terms of capturing and managing and analyzing our data with our suppliers for Scope 3, among other things. But it is really important to get your arms around the data first, and then, Pareto your suppliers, segment them. We also did a mapping of maturity. So across those 100 suppliers, it's quite diverse. Some are like BASF is very mature, and then some others not so much, but that helps guide you in the engagement with them. And then, it's about the partnership, maybe building incentive programs for the suppliers. We're not quite there yet. We're still at the carrot phase, like trying to incentivize them through recognition or joint innovation projects and jointly funding those projects. Eventually the stick, we haven't put it in our master service agreements yet, but a lot of companies are talking about doing that. So focus, Pareto, put kind of the roadmap in place with those suppliers and build the partnerships. And most of all, partner internally with your procurement and supply chain.
Yeah, all great advice. And thanks so much for coming in and talking to us. I really appreciate it.